Welcome back to True Life Scary Tales Part 2. I'm Amanda. These are my true to life experienced tales, and I'm going to give you quite the scare. So stay tuned. Thank you. I hope you've been enjoying our true life scary tales. These are my actual experiences. And so let's get started. We'll call this one, I See You. So for this one, I lived in Pine Hills, Florida. And there were two 18-year-olds and two adult men, including myself, living in this house. Now, I came to them sort of late, so I didn't have my own room or bed at the time. I sort of slept on the couch in this particular instance. So I didn't think anything of it. I've been in that house for quite some time, several months at that point, if not longer. And we were all gathered around chatting right before everybody decided to go off around the corner and down the hall to where all their rooms were. This left me in our very large living room. I had a couch that was over by a little side door that would go out to our driveway. But in the front of that, I could see on the wall ahead of me a 55-gallon tank that was always lit. The doorway into the kitchen, which allowed me to see part of the fridge and most of the cabinets, which was the same direction they went to go to their rooms. And then as we continued on past that, on the other side of that doorway, there was a whole nother part of the living room, like a second living room almost, where another couch and chairs and things like that, and the TV. And so I was a little ways off from that part of the living room. So as we're sitting there and everybody broke up for bed, I'm kind of a night owl. And so I'm sitting there on the couch and I'm just getting ready to reach down to start untying my shoes and get ready to, well, at least lay down. It took me a while to fall asleep, so wasn't especially tired this night. So I was kind of, just chilling, getting ready to do what I needed to do for bed. So right before I get ready to reach down to untie my shoes, I see a bright light coming from the kitchen. So my roommate, we'll call him David. I was like, David, is that you? Did you forget something? Are you out here for a little snacky? I expected him to come running out in his little nightshirt, as he usually did, to chat with me. But instead, I didn't hear a response. So what happened next is that light, while it was still shining, started moving towards the living room. Kind of sort of towards me in that direction. It came out of the kitchen, through the doorway towards where I was. And I realized very quickly that's not the refrigerator light. So as it came into the living room, it went from being kind of a bright light to literally being a body like an apparition that you could see through. So literally picture a little boy standing there, not being able to see its head, so no head, just from the neck down to the toes. It was definitely a young child. I would have said probably about 7 or 8. And I'll never forget, the details were that he was wearing a white tank top that had the little red trim on it, and then matching shorts that were red with white trim, like you'd see a lot of little kids would wear. And they tend to get attached to those type of things and wear them all the time. So it was very much like what you would see a young kid in. As I began to be able to see it, it started literally walking directly towards me. No noise, no words, just slowly heading directly towards me. Now, as it continued on its path, I could see it passing our 55-gallon tank, our fish tank, and its reflection was shining in the fish tank. I was completely stunned in silence. This is the only time I ever saw an apparition, or a ghost, or whatever you want to call it. But to me, this was like a full-on apparition, and it was walking straight at me. And, matters worse, I can see its reflection, so it made it so much more real. So as it slowly came across, and it looked literally like it was heading like dead towards me, I was just stunned to silence and watched and didn't know what to do. I was frozen. So as it came closer and closer, closer and closer, then as it looked like it was going to be right at me, it went through the door next to me, followed by the outside security light blinking on. I was like, wow. And then I ran down the hallway to figure out whose room I was sleeping in that night, because it scared the bejesus out of me. As you can imagine, freaked me out. So, of course, they teased me. Nobody believed me that I saw anything. They all joked and, made their phones ring and scare me all through the night. It was a pretty rough night. So I was not exactly amused with this, but I knew what I'd seen, and I knew I was awake. And I can only say what I saw. Now, I know a lot of people don't believe, and that's okay. Again, if you haven't experienced it, I can understand why it would be very hard for you to figure out what in the world it could have been that I saw. But I know. So about a month goes by, and one of the kids that are there, the 18-year-olds, came up to me, Frankie. And Frankie looked at me very sternly and said, "Listen, I've seen things too here. If you tell the others, I'll deny it. I don't want anybody teasing me. I don't want anybody to not believe me. But sometimes I see dark shadows and kind of like little shadow men jumping around." He's like, "I've seen things too." So I was relieved to know it wasn't just me. But I feel like me and him were the only ones that would admit to it, or were open-minded enough to be able to know that we saw something. So, after, it really sinking into me and kind of bothering me, I was like, geez, I wonder what in the world this could be. I never saw it again. It was never something that, continually went through there. I mean, clearly it was a residual haunting, something that didn't interact with me, but I wanted to know more. There had to be a reason that this was going on. So I decided to go over to the neighbor's house. He was an older gentleman. He'd been living in the neighborhood for quite some time. But I thought to myself, well, I won't tell him what I saw, because I'd rather see if he has any reaction to some of the questions I have. So I just went over and politely was like, "Hey, neighbor, I have a question for you. The people that used to live here before, David and Larry moved in, did they have any kids? Were there children living here before?" He goes, "Children, kids, no. No, just an older couple. Well, their grandkids would come and visit in the summer sometimes. Actually," he said, "it's really a sad, sad story. Quite the tragedy, actually. Their grandson actually drowned in the bathtub in their house." Well, I freaked. I completely freaked out. I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, it's horrible. He's like 7 or 8 and he drowned." So after that, I didn't have any choice, I thought, but to tell him what I'd seen. And when I described the outfit, the little white tank top with red trim, the little red shorts with white trim, he freaked out and he said that kid wore that outfit all the time, constantly. I was like, "Phew, well, at least I kind of have an idea what happened and where this came from. And I can kind of, put some meaning behind it as to why this might be happening." But that's not quite where this ends. One of my occupations was to drive a bus. And I used to drive for a company called Mears downtown. And I drove the big 55-foot buses. And there was a girl that I used to work with. And we'll call her Alicia. And I knew her. We'd worked together quite a bit. We weren't best buds or anything. We didn't spend a lot of quality time together. We worked together. One day, she came up to me while I was out on their patio area, where we usually kind of sat to shoot the shit. She came out and she goes, "Hey, sometimes I hear you, kind of talking about like a cult or, paranormal stuff." I was like, "Yeah." I was like, I'd like to think that I've got a little information from things I've read. I mean, I wouldn't call me an expert. She's like, "Well, I think my house is haunted." Now, I was like, wow, okay, wow. Well, so what kind of stuff's happening? And she went on to tell me the details that, she saw people walking around. She saw things were moved, I should say. That she'd come around and try to do something and be startled by something that was there 5 seconds ago being moved. Cabinet doors opening, things like that. She says, "I'm petrified. I don't know what to do." And then she said, "Can you come over maybe and, I don't know, see what you think?" I was like, "Well, I mean, I'm no expert. I mean, if you want me to come over and it makes you feel better and your family feel better, I'll come over and see what I think. But I'm not so sure that I'm the person to talk to about this." But sure. So I got her address, and then I looked at it, and I was like, "Wait a minute. You live on Santa Anita Street?" She's like, "Yeah." "What is your address?" You've probably guessed by now. She gave me my old address. She lived in my old house. I was like, "Well, I just saved myself the trouble of having to come over." She goes, "Why is that?" I said, "I lived there. I lived there for years. It's haunted. There is a problem there. There are things." And I told her what I knew about the little boy who had passed away in the bathtub, about some of the things that some of the other people had seen. And, wow. I mean, this was like, I don't know, it had to be like 6 years later, seriously, from when I lived there. So really kind of crazy that it just happened to be that I run into somebody else that lived in my old house and kind of backed me up on some of the things that I saw when I lived there. So it's pretty unreal. So I don't know if any of you've ever had any experiences, but certainly feel free to tell us down in the comments below. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and share with all your friends.
And hit that bell so you know when we have a new video.
Hello, Amanda. It's time to play a game.